As a software developer, how often do you leave a backdoor in your code? I used to do it for every major project until 3 months ago when my entire life fell apart because of a single line of code buried deep in a banking app. And now I'm not sure if I'm the villain in this story or just another victim of my own arrogance. Most people think backdoors are just for hackers or government spies. But the truth is, regular developers like me put them in all the time, sometimes for convenience, sometimes for troubleshooting, sometimes because we're too lazy to do things the right way. It's an open secret in the industry that nobody talks about at conferences. I didn't start out planning to become a security risk. I was just a kid from a small town in Ohio who got lucky with a full ride to Carnegie Mellon for computer science, the first in my family to even go to college. My parents were so proud they took out a second mortgage just to help me with living expenses in Pittsburgh. I promised I'd make it. Worth their sacrifice, graduation came with a mountain of anxiety. I had student loans to pay back, parents to make proud, and absolutely no idea if I was actually good enough to survive in the real world. When FinSecure offered me a job, I took it immediately. Even though the salary was lower than my classmates were getting, it was stability, and that's what I needed. My first few months were a blur of orientation sessions, security training, and small bug fix assignments. I was desperate to prove myself, working late hours, studying documentation on weekends, doing everything I could to look like I belonged. One senior developer named Jake took me under his wing. He was this 40-something guy with 3 kids and a perpetually exhausted look, but he knew the systems better than anyone. When the mobile banking project came up, Jake recommended me for the team. It was my first real chance to show what I could do. I spent every waking hour on that project, pouring everything into making it perfect. Then 2 weeks before launch, during a routine security check, I found a massive authentication vulnerability in the login sequence. It would take days to fix properly. We'd have to rebuild the entire auth flow, and there was no way to do that before the deadline. The client had already sold their customers on the launch date with a big marketing push. They weren't going to accept any delays. I panicked, but didn't tell anyone. I kept looking for shortcuts, ways to patch it without rebuilding the whole system. Nothing worked, and the days kept ticking by. Jake kept asking for status updates, and I kept saying everything was fine. While silently freaking out, it was during one of those late nights staring at my monitor at 2 a.m. when the idea came to me: a maintenance portal, a hidden entry point that would let me bypass the normal authentication if I needed to fix something quickly after launch. It wasn't elegant, but it would give me time to properly fix the auth issue in the next update without delaying the release. I added the code, buried it deep where code reviews wouldn't catch it, and justified it to myself as a temporary solution, a band-aid that I'd remove in a few weeks once I fixed the real problem. Launch day came. We had some minor issues, but nothing related to the vulnerability I'd found. The client was happy, my team was happy, and I was promoted to senior developer with a nice bonus. I used half of it to pay down my student loans and sent the other half to my parents. They called me crying, saying how proud they were. I meant to remove the backdoor, I really did. But then other projects came up and the mobile app was running smoothly, so it stayed there and stayed there and stayed there until I almost forgot about it altogether. About 6 months after launch, there was an issue with transaction processing in the app. The regular debugging tools weren't helping, and the client was getting antsy. That's when I remembered my backdoor. I slipped in, fixed the issue in minutes, and slipped out. Nobody ever knew that I'd bypassed all security protocols, and I felt like a genius. That became my thing. My special trick. At every job, I'd leave myself a way in. I rationalized it as being prepared for emergencies. But the truth is, I liked having that power, that secret control over systems others couldn't access. It made me feel important, special, better than my peers in some way I couldn't fully articulate. I moved companies a few times, always to bigger, better positions with more responsibility, and each time I brought my habit with me, leaving little entrance points hidden in the code, my personal insurance policies that let me fix problems faster than anyone else could, which only enhanced my reputation as a miracle worker. After 5 years in the industry, I landed at Meridian Financial. It was a huge step up in prestige and pay. They managed over $25 billion in assets for high net worth clients and had security protocols that made my previous employers look like they were running Windows 95. With the password set to password, the interview process was intense: 6 rounds, including a full background check and a 4-hour technical assessment. I passed it all with flying colors and was assigned to their wealth management platform team. My new boss, Derek, was the CTO, a former Google engineer with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through you at Meridian. They actually cared about security. The code reviews were rigorous, the penetration testing aggressive, the audit trails comprehensive. But old habits die hard within my first month. I added my standard backdoor hidden away where even their thorough reviews wouldn't find it the first time I used it. I felt that familiar rush, the sense of being smarter than the system, but also a new feeling, a twinge of guilt that I was betraying the trust of a company that actually took security seriously. I pushed that feeling aside, telling myself it was just a tool that helped me do my job better. For almost a year, everything was fine. I used my Backdoor sparingly only when absolutely necessary to fix issues that would have taken days through normal channels. I was careful, always covering my tracks, always making it look like I'd gone through proper procedures. I was rising through the ranks at Meridian, quickly becoming a favorite of both Derek and the CEO, a guy named Michael who had built the company from scratch. I was given more responsibility, bigger projects, bigger bonuses, and I started to believe I deserved it all, that I was just that good. Then came the night that destroyed everything. It was a Thursday, I remember, because I'd been out for drinks with some colleagues celebrating the end of a major project launch. I got home around midnight, fell into bed, slightly buzzed, and was just drifting off when my phone started going crazy, with notifications, texts, calls, emails all at once. I grabbed my phone, squinting at the screen to see emergency alerts from Meridian's security systems. My stomach dropped as I read the notifications. Unauthorized access detected, multiple security layers, bypassed customer data, compromised. I drove to the office, still in the clothes I'd worn to the bar, my mind racing through possibilities. None of them good. When I pulled into the parking garage at 2 a.m., there were already dozens of cars there, including the CEO's Tesla and several vehicles I didn't recognize. The elevator ride to our floor was the longest of my life. I was rehearsing explanations, defenses, excuses, but deep down, I knew exactly what had happened. The conference room looked like a war room. Executives in rumpled suits, security personnel with multiple laptops open, IT staff looking shell-shocked, and two people in the corner with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. Michael, the CEO, was red-faced, shouting into his phone, while Derek stood at the head of the table, his face grim. Everyone looked up when I walked in. Derek gestured for me to join him at the main computer where he had code pulled up on the screen. It was my code. My backdoor, the carefully crafted maintenance portal I'd built months ago. We've been compromised. Derek said, his voice eerily calm. Someone found a way into our systems through this code. Do you recognize it? The room went silent. Everyone watching, waiting for my response. I stared at the screen, praying for some other explanation. Some way this wasn't what it looked like. But there was no mistake. It was my code. My backdoor. Yes, I said, it's mine. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once. Michael slammed down, his phone, and stalked over, his face twisted with rage. You did this, he spat. You put this in our system. I tried to explain it wasn't for malicious purposes, just for maintenance, but my words sounded hollow even to me. Derek raised a hand, silencing the room. I need details, Alex, all of them. When did you add this? What exactly does it do? Who might have known about it? One of the federal agents stepped forward, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'm Special Agent Lowell from the Financial Crimes Task Force. She said, before you answer those questions, you should know that over $43 million has been transferred out of customer accounts in the last 3 hours, and we've traced the access point directly to this back door. I felt the floor tilting beneath me. $43 million. This wasn't just a security breach. This was theft on a massive scale. Derek's face had gone pale. How did this happen? He asked. How did someone find this back door? I shook my head. I don't know. I've been careful. But Agent Lowell interrupted. Have you implemented similar backdoors in other systems? The question hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, the scope of what I'd done crashed down on me. All the systems, all the companies, all potentially vulnerable because of me. Yes, I admitted at every job I've had in the last 5 years. A collective gasp went through the room. Derek closed his eyes briefly as if in physical pain. You need to list them all. Agent Lowell said, every company, every system, every backdoor right now. The next few hours were a blur of confessions, explanations, system diagrams. I wrote down every company, every system, every backdoor I could remember watching as they mobilized a task force, making calls to security teams at other financial institutions. Some of my former employers had already transitioned to new systems, but most were still running code that contained my hidden entrances by dawn. They had confirmed that 3 other institutions had been breached, though not as severely as Meridian at some point. Agent Lowell pulled me aside. You're not under arrest yet, she said. But don't leave town. We'll need to interview you formally. Derek personally escorted me out of the building, taking my badge, laptop, and access cards. You understand you're terminated effective immediately, he said, and I'll be recommending to the board that we pursue criminal charges. I went home to my empty apartment, collapsed onto my couch, and waited for the inevitable news stories about the breach, the arrest that would surely follow the end of my career, my freedom, my future. I checked news sites constantly, but strangely, there was nothing. 3 days passed, an anxious silence before my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. We need to meet. The voice said it was Derek. I almost didn't recognize him. He sounded exhausted. He gave me an address, a coffee shop far from the Meridian offices, and told me to come alone. I considered not going, considered running, but where would I go instead? I showered, shaved, and went to face whatever was coming. Derek was sitting in the back corner of the shop, 2 laptops open, a stack of papers beside him, a cup of coffee gone cold in front of him. He looked like he hadn't slept since I'd last seen him. I slid into the seat across from him, waiting for accusations. Threats first. The The good news, he said, we've managed to contain the immediate breach at Meridian and recovered about 60% of the stolen funds. I felt a small wave of relief. The bad news is we've identified 14 other systems with your backdoors, including 2 major banks and a stock trading platform. My stomach clenched. 3 of those systems have already been compromised, though not as severely as ours. Derek continued. Clearly, someone found one of your backdoors and realized you'd use similar code. Elsewhere, I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, to be anywhere but sitting across from this man whose trust I'd betrayed. Why, Derek asked, finally showing real emotion. Why would you risk so much? I tried to explain how it started as a shortcut, became a habit, then almost an addiction. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he shook his head. You're not understanding. I don't care about your psychological motivations. I want to know why technically you chose such an obvious implementation. I was confused. Derek had been a developer before becoming an executive. He knew code, but he wasn't a security specialist. What do you mean, obvious? I asked. He turned one of the laptops toward me, showing my code from Meridian side by side, with snippets from 2 other systems I'd worked on. See here and here, he pointed to similar patterns. The same basic structure, the identical weaknesses. You used variations of the same technique everywhere you went. It's like you left a signature. The realization hit me. Suddenly, all of my backdoors followed roughly the same pattern because I'd gotten lazy, reusing the same tricks with minor modifications. Any decent developer who found one could easily find the others. I felt sick. Derek closed the laptop. This isn't just about you anymore, or even Meridian. We're looking at a potential financial crisis. If all these systems get hit simultaneously, he pushed a folder toward me. Inside was a contract. What's this? I asked. The federal agencies want to prosecute you. He said they're building a case as we speak, but I've proposed an alternative. He explained that a task force had been formed with representatives from all the affected companies. They needed someone who knew exactly where all the vulnerabilities were, who could help close them quickly and quietly, before anyone else discovered them. That someone was me. The contract was for a consulting position, working under strict supervision to identify and remove every backdoor I'd ever created, then help strengthen the overall security of each system. It's that or prosecution, Derek said, bluntly. And I'm pushing hard for this option against significant opposition, so don't make me regret it. Signed immediately. For the next 2 months, I worked alongside security teams from each affected company, under the watchful eyes of federal agents, identifying and removing every vulnerability I'd created. It was exhausting, humiliating work, facing the people whose systems I'd compromised, seeing their expressions shift from anger to reluctant cooperation. The worst was returning to FinSecure, my first employer. Jake was still there now, the head of security, his face when he saw me walk in with the task. Force was something I'll never forget, a mixture of disbelief, disappointment, and rage. He said, you were the one who compromised our system. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. He shook his head. I vouched for you. I got you that first big project. I told everyone you were going to be exceptional. I know I said I'm sorry. He laughed bitterly. Sorry doesn't begin to cover it. The bank lost millions because of your backdoor. They almost went under. 3 branch managers were fired. The CEO resigned. You destroyed lives. Alex, there was nothing I could say to that, because he was right. As we worked together over the next few days, Jake's anger didn't diminish, but he became more professional, more focused on fixing the problem. He asked me once why I'd done it. I was scared. I told him I found that authentication vulnerability 2 weeks before launch and didn't know how to fix it properly in time. He stared at me for a long moment. You could have just told me, he said. We would have worked it out together. Gone to the client if necessary, extended the deadline. That's what teams are. For the realization that I'd created all this damage out of simple fear of admitting I needed help was devastating. By the end of the 2 months, we had identified and closed every vulnerability I could remember creating, plus a few I'd forgotten about. But the most disturbing discovery was that 3 of my backdoors showed evidence of being accessed by someone other than me. Whoever had hit Meridian had found others too, and we still didn't know who they were. The final meeting of the task force was held in the same conference room where this had all started. Representatives from each affected company sat around the table along with the federal agents who had been monitoring our work. Agent Lowell stood to address the room. Thanks to the cooperation of all parties, we've successfully closed all known vulnerabilities without any further breaches. She said, according to our investigation, the attacks appear to have been conducted by a group operating out of Eastern Europe. Though we're still working to confirm. She looked directly at me. As for the question of prosecution, based on the full cooperation provided and the extensive remediation work, we're recommending no criminal charges at this time. I exhaled for the first time in months. There were conditions, of course, a substantial fine, several years of supervised work restrictions on the types of systems I could access, but I wasn't going to prison after everyone left. Derek asked me to stay behind. You know what the worst part of all this is, he said. I shook my head. We checked the logs of every system that was compromised, including ours. You know what we found? He continued. None of the backdoors you created were necessary, not a single one. Every issue you fixed through them could have been addressed through proper channels. Yes, it would have taken longer, required more paperwork, involved more people, but the systems were designed that way for a reason. He was right, and that truth hit harder than anything else. I'd convinced myself I needed those shortcuts, that I was special somehow, above the security protocols everyone else followed. He stood to leave. One last thing. He said, "Next week, I'm launching a security audit of every system at Meridian, and I want you there, me." I asked, confused, "You're keeping me on?" He almost smiled. I'm not stupid enough to fire the one person who knows exactly how developers think when they're trying to cheat the system that was. 2 months ago now, I spend my days hunting for backdoors instead of creating them, looking for the same patterns, the same shortcuts, the same arrogance I once had. It's humbling work. Necessary work yesterday. I found my first one. A junior developer had created a similar maintenance portal, hidden deep in a new credit processing system. I called him into a conference room, showed him what I'd found, and watched his face go through the same emotions I'd felt that night in the Meridian conference room: fear, defensiveness, rationalization. I didn't lecture him, didn't threaten him. Instead, I showed him the logs from Meridian, the damage that had been done, the lives that had been affected. I told him my story by the end. He was the one who suggested removing his backdoor completely. I still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, thinking about all the systems still running with hidden doors created by other developers, just like I used to be. I know we can't find them all. I know there will always be people looking for shortcuts, but at least now I'm on the right side of that battle. It took nearly losing everything, but I finally understand something that should have been obvious from the start. No convenience is worth the cost of compromising security, especially when it's not just your security at stake, but the financial well-being of thousands of people who trusted their money to systems you built. I haven't spoken to my parents since this happened. I can't bring myself to tell them what I did, how close I came. To going to prison, sometimes I start to dial their number but hang up before it connects. What would I even say? "Hey, Mom and Dad, remember how proud you were of me?" Well, turns out I'm actually a terrible developer who put millions of people at risk. My colleagues at Meridian still don't trust me. Most won't even make eye contact in the hallway. I don't blame them. I wouldn't trust me either. Derek is the only one who treats me normally, and I think that's just because he sees me as a useful tool, not as a person worth redemption. Agent Lowell checks in every month, reviewing my work, asking about any new vulnerabilities I've discovered. Our conversations are strictly professional, but sometimes I catch her looking at me with curiosity, like she's trying to decide if I'm genuinely reformed or just playing another angle. The junior developer whose backdoor I found stops by my desk sometimes with questions about security best practices. I think he sees me as a cautionary tale, what not to become. If we're being honest, though, I think most developers are just one bad decision away from becoming me. It's so easy to justify cutting corners when you're under pressure, when deadlines are looming, when you think you know better than the system. I'm not allowed to work on production code anymore, just review and audit, which means my actual coding skills are getting rusty. Sometimes I miss it, the creative process of building something from scratch, but maybe that's for the best. Maybe I can't be trusted with that power anymore. The money is the worst part, though. 40% of what was stolen from Meridian, over $17 million, is still missing. That's money that belonged to real people, families, businesses, charities. I think about that number every day. It's tattooed on my conscience, a constant reminder of the real-world cost of my arrogance. I've started volunteering at a coding boot camp, teaching security principles to new developers, trying to instill better habits from the beginning. Maybe it's a form of penance, or maybe it's just my way of trying to balance the scales, but it feels important, necessary. Even one of my students asked me last week, as a software developer, "How often do you leave a backdoor in your code?" I looked at her bright, eager face, so much like mine had been years ago, and gave her the same answer. I now give everyone never again. I said never again. So ATA for creating backdoors in every system I worked on, even when it led to a massive financial theft. Or am I the victim of an industry that pressures developers to cut corners and prioritize speed over security? The truth is, I'm probably both the villain in this story and someone who got caught up in a system that rewards the wrong things. I'm trying to make it right now. That's all I can do. My career will never recover. My reputation is destroyed, my future uncertain, but at least I'm not making it worse. At least I'm not still creating vulnerabilities that put people at risk sometimes. When I'm reviewing code, I still get the urge to add my special touch, my signature, but then I remember that night at Meridian, the looks on everyone's faces, the damage I caused, and the urge passes. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that the shortcuts that make your life easier can make someone else's life much, much harder, and no convenience is worth that cost. Not for me, not for anyone.